Welcome, everybody, to Black and Gold Weekly, a weekly Boston Bruins show here on YouTube, brought to you in partnership with Black and Gold Productions. I am your host, John. We are on episode 62, and returning again is my co-host, Danny Jaillet. What is going on, Danny? Great to have you back. Welcome in, and ready to talk about another week of Bruins action.
I am always ready, and I believe 62 was the rookie Milan Lucic number.
Yes, before he took 17.
And, yeah, I am definitely ready. The Bruins, in spite of what happened last night, had a decent week overall, and it's good to see them continue to play at a consistent level with the playoffs nearing.
Yeah, definitely. They're still one of the hotter teams in the NHL, although last night certainly didn't go as well as we would hope. But nonetheless, overall they had a pretty good week, had a great bounce back from that Toronto loss last week that we spent most of last week's episodes venting about. But they came back from it well, and they put some more wins in the win column. So we'll get into all of that here in this one. But before we get going, I want to give a big thank you to Mark Allred and the entire team at Black and Gold Productions for all of their support. This show would not be happening without them. Also want to draw your attention down to the description of the video. There's some 3 links down there. If you are in the market for apparel, whether it's Boston Bruins apparel, NHL apparel from any of the 32 teams, or NCAA college apparel, it is all there down in the description. It'd really be awesome if you guys could check that out. Got a lot of great different products, a lot of awesome designs, and really cool team branded stuff that you can get down there. So it really does help out a lot and is greatly appreciated. So please feel free to check that out. But let's get into it here, Danny, because we got quite a bit to go over. We've got a lot of injuries going on with the Bruins right now. We've got Jake DeBrusk on another heater. This guy, it's unreal how up and down he is. We got Mclaughlin scoring his first NHL goal back in the New Jersey game. We've got some good wins, also some one loss to talk about, and then we got to look ahead at the schedule here for the upcoming week. So again, guys, we record this on Wednesdays. You guys don't see this until Friday afternoon, but Wednesdays is when we are recording this, so everything is through Wednesday as far as what information we have. So, Danny, let's get into it here. I want to give a congratulations to Mclaughlin. First NHL goal in his first NHL game in a very one-sided affair against the New Jersey Devils. But, man, was it great to see him score.
3 weeks after leaving Chestnut Hill, he puts on the black and gold sweater and scores his first goal at home. What a moment that must be. And
he had so many family members and friends in the arena too.
He did, and how exciting must that be? And it's really great to see these local kids make it and make an impact. And I'm hoping that this can kind of set his career moving, get the wheels moving on his career. What a moment.
Yeah, I hope he can really turn out to be like a solid NHLer. Mm-hmm. That'd be a big help for the Bruins, who need some of those younger forwards to start to make an impact and continue to make an impact. And if he can become a solid NHLer, I will be very, very happy with that for sure. And it was great to see him score his first goal. Unfortunately, though, the injury bug has started to hit the Bruins here. And for the most part, they had been doing pretty well injury-wise. I mean, obviously, certain guys have missed some games. But overall, they had been doing pretty well. They hadn't had a lot of points where they had a bunch of guys out of the lineup altogether or anything like that. And then all of a sudden, these last couple of days, David Pastrnak gets injured against Columbus. Trent Frederick gets injured against Columbus. Now Hampus Lindholm gets banged up in the game against Detroit. Injuries are starting to pile up here for the Bruins, and it's getting a little late in the season for that because we are getting close to playoff time, and you really don't want any of these injuries carrying over into the playoffs.
Pastrnak, Lindholm, and Frederick, those are three key players on this Bruins team. These are not guys you want injured. These are guys you want full steam ahead with the playoffs nearing. And I just hope they can recover quickly. And, it is going to happen. We are at the point of the regular season where the games are going to start to pile up. But it's still unfortunate to see. I mean, especially a guy like Lindholm, who you brought in to kind of, I don't want to say make a Stanley Cup push necessarily, but put you on par with the likes of the Florida Panthers and, you know, teams like that, the Carolina Hurricanes, and
Yep.
now he's out too. I mean, that's just, this is going to be interesting to watch to see if they could fully recover for the playoffs. Because if they're not fully healthy, they would have already had a tough road in the playoffs if they were fully healthy. But if they're not fully healthy, particularly Lindholm, just because of the way he moves the puck and can move the puck out of his zone and get plays going, then this might spell trouble for the Bruins in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the hope here is that nothing is anything long term. It's all just little banged up here and there. Sounds like Lindholm is probably not anything serious. That's the way Bruce Cassidy was talking last night. But until he's back in the lineup and back out there on the ice, I guess you never really know for sure. I guess it's early enough where there's still 3-4 weeks left of the regular season. I guess 3 weeks now left in the regular season. If this is just kind of a miss a few games type of thing, it really doesn't matter all that much. But the real hope here is that this isn't anything significant with any of these guys, because like you said, they're all key players. I mean, Frederick has really grown this year and turned himself into a very important player on this team physically, and the ability to chip in some offense on that third line now.
Yeah.
With Coyle and Smith, and obviously David Pastrnak's your best goal scorer. Lindholm came in to stabilize the D and really improve the D core. You need him in the lineup. So the real hope here is that all of these guys are going to be 100% come playoff time, because that's when it really matters. You can't afford to have these guys out of the lineup in the playoffs. You need Frederick's physicality. You need Pastrnak's goal scoring. You need Lindholm to be a shutdown D partner along with McAvoy. These are all important players. So we're just hoping that the injuries can kind of get themselves out of the way now, have it be nothing serious, and have these guys ready to go for the playoffs.
And what do the playoffs come down to a lot of the time? Depth.
Yep.
These are all key players, yes, but more importantly, they add depth to this Bruins roster. And you've heard us say this a ton of times on this show. The best playoff teams have depth, and if the Bruins are, even missing one of those players in Pastrnak, Frederick, or Lindholm, then that spells trouble, because all the good teams that advance far are incredibly deep.
Yeah, no, 100%. And you don't want to be testing your depth, going into the playoffs before the playoff games even start. That's not a good position to be in, to say the least. And I think the Bruins, their regular starting lineup is very good. They're a very good hockey team. But when you start taking guys out and start testing that depth already, I don't think the Bruins have a super deep pool of guys that I would feel comfortable with coming in and starting to replace regulars in the lineup that I feel like can contribute at the same level of those regulars, Yeah, I mean, there's nobody that's coming in and replacing David Pastrnak's goal scoring.
Yeah, and it all goes back to what we've seen from the Bruins in these past couple of years during the playoff runs. They're very top-heavy in terms of the talent.
Yep.
This is a good thing because you have that top-heavy talent, but if one of those pieces goes missing of the puzzle, then the entire puzzle is broken.
Yep.
So the Bruins, it seems like, at least since I've been following them for the last, 19 years or so, it seems like a lot of these teams have always been very top heavy. And this Bruins team, yet again, is another example of that.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. You start plucking regulars out of the lineup, and this lineup goes downhill pretty fast for sure. So they need to be healthy. They need to be ready to go for the playoffs, and at this point, that's really what matters. I'm not too worried about these last, whatever 10 games, whatever's left in the regular season. Bruins might have a little bit more than that left. I think they've got like 12 games left or something. Yeah, 12 games left for Boston. I'm not super worried about those. I think the big thing here is being ready to go come playoff time and being healthy come playoff time when you need to be the most.
Yeah, the big thing here, I think, is to play the final, stretch of the regular season solid, but start to prepare for the playoffs. Because the Bruins are going to need all the preparation they can get with the level of talent that they're going to be facing in any round, quite frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully the injury situation doesn't get any worse for Boston, but they're certainly dealing with a few right now. And again, we're just hoping that they're not anything too significant, not anything long-term, and that all of these guys will be back and healthy come playoff time when it matters the most. Another thing we got to talk about is Jake DeBrusk because, Jake went on a little bit of a heater again here over the last few weeks. And this is, like I've said, this is vintage Jake DeBrusk here. But he's so up and down. He has stretches where he's really, really good. Then he completely disappears for, 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever. Then he comes back and has another stretch where he's very good. Well, in the Bruins' last 6 games, Jake DeBrusk has 6 goals, 2 assists for 8 points, and is a +7 in his last 6 games. So obviously this has been one of those very good stretches for DeBrusk. Now, if you look back to the 6 games before these past 6 games, he had one point. He had 1 assist in the Winnipeg game and was a -2 in the 6 games before these last 6 games. So he goes from having 1 point and a -2 in 6 games to having 6 goals, 8 points, and a +7 in 6 games. And then I remember a few weeks ago, back in February, when he went on the great stretch in February, we were talking about the same thing, how over, a certain game stretch, he has these great numbers, like point per game, tons of goals, and then he completely disappears, and then he comes back, has another really solid stretch, and then completely disappears again. Jake DeBrusk has got to be one of the streakiest players I've ever seen in the NHL. Like, it's almost comical at this point how streaky he is.
Yeah, it's really baffling. It's like, in Space Jam when the Monstars take the NBA players' power. It's like Jake DeBrusk is like the NBA players without their skills for 2 weeks, and then he comes back and he's the next Michael Jordan of hockey. No. But, it's really baffling that he goes on these hot and cold streaks. But I will say that even though he was on a little bit of a cool streak, it didn't seem that long since his, hot streak in February. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes he'll go on droughts, and it seems like it takes him like a month.
Yeah, this wasn't that long of a drought. It was, he was playing well into the beginning of March. And then, it was almost the full month of March. It was close. He gave us pretty much nothing for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games. 8-game stretch where he didn't really give much of anything.
Interesting, because it didn't seem terribly long, but that is long by...
No, it was about 3 weeks.
By sports standards, and he really is baffling. He has 34 points now. This year compared to the 14 he had last year.
That's an upgrade.
That is an upgrade, and he had 35 points in 2019, 2020, and his 21 goals are the most since his 27 in the 2018-19 season.
Which was his best year.
Yeah. So he is having a solid year. It's just, can you count on him for consistency? And I think this year, though, you could see last year that Bruce Cassidy really didn't trust him to do much.
Yep.
And when he got put in playoff, um, action, he was understandably a little rusty last year. Now he's gotten more action. He feels more comfortable with where he is, and he's going to be one of my players to watch come playoff time because if he can show consistency and give the Bruins production, then that is definitely a positive thing for the Bruins, yes, but it also tells me that maybe he's growing out of his slumps. We'll have to
Hmm.
see.
Yeah, I think which Jake DeBrusk shows up for the playoffs is going to be huge for this Bruins team. Like, if cold Jake DeBrusk shows up, then he's just not going to do anything. He'll probably have no points in 5 games and whatever, and it will be cold Jake DeBrusk. But if hot Jake DeBrusk shows up, I mean, imagine if he rips off like, say a 6-game series. Imagine he rips off like 5 goals, 2 assists, and 7 points in a 6-game series in round one. Like,
That would be
hot
big.
Jake DeBrusk could be huge for this Bruins team if he can play that way in the playoffs.
That would be huge, and he would be a big depth piece. If we can get the scoring Jake DeBrusk, that's huge for the playoffs. It's just that we can never know if we can count on him consistently enough. But I'm going to be interested to see what he does
Yeah.
because I think it could potentially determine how far the Bruins go.
And I think it could, have an effect on what happens this offseason with Jake DeBrusk.
Mm.
If he comes up and lights it up in the playoffs and, plays really well, then do the Bruins get a little bit more hesitant about getting rid of him? He just signed the 2-year deal. Or does it up his trade value to the point where the Bruins feel happy with what the return would be, and that may actually help facilitate a trade because he does play well and his value goes up on the trade market. I feel like, what happens this offseason is going to be really interesting. Also, if he doesn't play well in the playoffs, does that make it get to the point where the Bruins just dump him off for basically nothing and say, just we'll give you away to whoever will take you?
Well, we talked about it on the show after the trade deadline. It was interesting that the Bruins signed him to a 2-year deal. We thought it might have been, term in case the Bruins decided to trade him, but they didn't end up trading him. And, now do the Bruins dump him off if he doesn't play well? Do they trade him with term left on his contract? Or do they keep him for 2 more years after he performs potentially well in a playoff series? There's a lot of different directions this
Mm-hmm.
can go still. And I think yes, of course, obviously it all depends on his performance. But with the type of player he is, it definitely kind of leaves a level of uncertainty in regards to what direction he and the team both go in.
Yeah, definitely. I think, what he does in the playoffs is going to be huge for just, the overall perception of him and what might happen in the offseason with him as far as a possible trade or anything like that. But he's got 21 goals this year. I'm sitting back and that's kind of slaps you in the face a little bit. Like, I can't believe Jake DeBrusk is a 20 goal scorer this year. Did not think we were going to see that at the beginning of the season. I mean, he only had 5 all of last season, and obviously last year was a horrible, horrible year for him. But I didn't think he was going to get back to being a 20 goal guy, and now here we are.
It really is kind of interesting to see. I mean, he has been very vocal about wanting to get more playing time, getting a better role, and Bruce Cassidy rolled the dice and gave it to him, and for the most part, he's proven Cassidy right, and he's backed up his play. He's been able to kind of show, he talked the talk, but he also walked the walk. And
Yep.
that's not something you see in sports a lot nowadays, truthfully.
Yeah, no, very true there. DeBrusk continues to be just a very interesting talking point around this team because just everything, the trade requests, the trade rumors, the awful year last year, the drop in production, now the return of production, the streakiness.
Mm.
He is just such an interesting piece, and I guess we're gonna find out how it all works out. But I do think that he needs to be a guy that shows up in the playoffs for the Bruins to have any chance of kind of going on some sort of run and making a push, because they're going to need more than just your typical Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak. So they need some of these other guys to really play well. And I think DeBrusk playing on that top line with Bergeron and Marchand needs to be one of those guys that plays well, along with Taylor Hall, along with Eric Haula, along with Charlie Coyle. Those are guys that are all going to need to bring it in the playoffs if the Bruins want to win and, knock off a team in the first round that is going to be probably more of a favorite than them.
And just when you think you've made up your mind or your opinion about Jake DeBrusk, either way, he goes and completely flips your opinion of him over the next week or so, and it is really confusing. And I'm wondering if we could segue, because I've been impressed with his play lately, Eric Haula. I've been really impressed with what he's been able to do, and we see the value. He struggled a little bit early on, but now we're starting to see him get really comfortable, and we're seeing him bring the value to this team, and it looks like a great offseason signing by Don Sweeney.
Yeah, I mean, this was a guy that did not get off to a good start this year, and the fans were all over him. Fans were all over him in the first half of the season because he wasn't really producing much, but holy cow, what a turn of events over the last few months for Eric Haula. He's up to 36 points on the season, plus 12. 23 assists on the year. He is playing excellent right now for the Boston Bruins. And I think all of those fans that were kind of sour on him at the beginning of the year owe him an apology, because he has been absolutely fantastic here over the last few months and just seems to be getting more and more comfortable and better as the season goes on.
His 36 points are the most since the 2017-18 season, when he had
Vegas
55 with Vegas, and when they had that magical year. And I think that's what the Bruins were banking on getting, that type of Eric Haula, and he's delivered. I mean, he was a player that I wasn't too high on at the beginning of the year, as I'm sure many of you weren't, but he's completely flipped my perspective on him, and he's really become, a scorer. Not that he's going to be the next, Alexander Ovechkin, but he's really kind of refined his game to be in the right places and given the Bruins key depth scoring over this last really month or so.
Another guy that got off to a really, really bad start this year but has completely flipped it around is Craig Smith. I mean, I remember it was probably just still a couple months ago we were on this show talking about what an awful season Craig Smith was having and how he wasn't scoring nearly enough, wasn't producing nearly enough. And all of a sudden, Craig Smith is at 16 goals and 32 points on the season. And that is very standard Craig Smith. I mean, this is a guy that in general scores around 20 goals a year. And, we've still got another 12 games to go. You can easily see Smith scoring another 2 or 3 goals, and he's going to be right around 20 goals again this year. He already matched his point total from last season at 32, and is past his point total from his last year in Nashville in 2019-2020. So, I mean, Smith was not good early in the season, but he's gotten to a point now where he is put up exactly what you would expect numbers-wise from Craig Smith.
2019-2020 with Nashville, he had 31 points. He has 32 right now. I think you were looking at, not to call you out, but let's see. I'm trying to look here. He had 38 points in 2018-19, and honestly, I think when the Bruins signed him originally, this is what they thought they were getting.
Yeah.
Like, this is the type of player that they thought they were getting, and, he struggled this year, and for the first half of the season, really, just like the team, but it's been since really January that he's sort of found his game and found his groove, and, I do remember calling him out on the show, and I remember you being so frustrated about him, and rightfully so. Now, that's not the case.
Yeah, no, he's another guy that has really gotten hot over the last few months and has started putting the puck in the net, and all of a sudden his season long numbers are right where you would have expected them to be this year.
Yeah, and we liked what he brought to the table because of his ability to get pucks to the net and provide depth scoring, and now that's exactly what he's doing, and he seems real comfortable while doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, those are some players here that have really gotten hot and have really started to produce and are becoming important, secondary scorers and depth pieces for this Bruins lineup, and need to continue that into the playoffs. Because again, this team isn't going anywhere unless this kind of production continues in the playoffs from a lot of these guys.
There was a point in the season, really kind of at the beginning of the season, where we looked at these signings, like Eric Holla, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and we said, where can these guys fit? They're not producing. Are we sure Don Sweeney made the right moves here? And I think for Holla in particular, you could say yes. Like now we see where Sweeney was going with this signing because we see what Eric Holla is able to do when he is on top of his game. Now,
Yep.
there are others like Nick Foligno who the jury is still out on, but for the most part, I think Holla has at least surpassed my expectations. I'm not sure about you.
Yeah, no, he's been better than I thought he was going to be. I figured he'd probably be around 30 points this year. That's what, when they brought him in, I was thinking, all right, Eric Holla, probably going to be a third liner. I wasn't expecting him to jump up and be the second line center. I thought that was going to be Coyle, but obviously they've kind of flipped spots in the lineup. It's worked out great. Coyle's got 40 points this season, and Holla's got 36. So they've ended up working out pretty well. I figured he'd be around 30 points this year. It looks like he's got a good shot to hit 40, so that's definitely above my expectations.
One of the things Bruce Cassidy is never afraid to do is switch lines and change things up.
Yep.
And this is something he did this year, and it's worked out for a lot of players. Like you said, particularly that fourth line with Coyle and Frederick, they have found their games. Not that they've ever lost it, but they've seemed more comfortable
Mm-hmm.
at the spot, and it's producing points for themselves and the Bruins.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, again, that's key for this team and their overall ability to win and how they can play, in the playoffs and how, they're going to be able to get the job done in the postseason, or if they're going to be able to get the job done in the postseason.
Yeah, and I like to think of the postseason as a chance. It's a new season. It's a new chance for players who may have had a rough regular season to really step up, and
Mm-hmm.
for players that have stepped up to continue to play at a high level. So I'm going to be really excited to see what these guys can do with a quote unquote clean slate.
Yeah, so next thing I want to get into here is the goaltending, because this has become an interesting situation
Mm.
over the last couple of weeks here. Jeremy Swayman has, obviously overall still had a very, very good year. 918 save percentage, 2.28 goals against average. Swayman's played extremely well this season, but if you look at his last few starts, he had a rough one against Toronto. Got lit up in that game for 6 goals against the Maple Leafs. Then last night against Detroit gives up another 4 goals. And there's starting to be some questions out there about Swayman and then Ullmark. While Swayman has started to struggle a little bit, Ullmark has actually gotten his game back on track and is playing very, very well right now for the Bruins. He has won his last 4 starts. Actually, let's see if that streak goes even beyond that. Let's see. Linus Ullmark has won his last 5 starts that he has started for the Bruins. And every single one of them has had a save percentage of at least 900 or higher, with the exception of the game against the Islanders, where he had an 889, giving up 3 goals on 27 shots. But the Bruins still won that game. Against Columbus, he had a 909. Against New Jersey, he had a 962. Against Winnipeg, he had a 931. Against Chicago, he had a 950. He won all of those games. Ullmark is starting to play really well, and then Swayman's kind of had a couple rough games in there. Again, I've said this earlier in the season on the show, but it really seems like the Bruins can never get both of these guys playing at their best at the same time, but one of them always seems to be on.
Yeah, one of them always seems to be on, and you wonder, this could be an interesting subplot once the playoffs start.
Yep.
You can't have one of them on, one of them off. You need one of them on and the other one on, and
you need the one that's in the net on, whoever's in the net.
Yeah, no, exactly. But you would like to say, okay, this guy is going to be my starting goaltender because he can play, strong. We know we're going to get a consistent game out of him because it's the playoffs. Now it's crunch time, and we haven't been able to see both goalies play well because at some point, let's just say, Swayman's going to be the starting goaltender for the playoffs. He's going to need rest. We're going to need, goalies to be able to get rest as, this team goes further and further, and there's little room for error. And Swayman is Swayman technically still a rookie, right? Or is he not?
He's technically still a rookie, yes.
So, okay, because the rookie wall, you hear that phrase all the time?
Mm-hmm.
Wonder if he's starting to hit that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean...
Because a lot's happened these last 2 months, if you really think about it. Goes to Providence to become the starting goaltender of Boston, and, it's a lot of games packed into 2 months, and, you wonder if he's starting to hit some sort of wall.
Yeah, and it's starting to bring back the question of who's going to start in the playoffs. Who's going to be the number one goalie in the postseason? Who's going to go out there in game one of their first round series against whoever they're playing? Who's going to be the one in the net? That, I don't think, really was a question being talked about 3 weeks ago. I think 3 weeks ago it was clear and obvious that Jeremy Swayman was the guy, and he was going to be the number one guy for the Bruins. And then all of a sudden now he has a couple tough games. Ullmark's playing great, and all of a sudden that question is right back out there of who the heck are they going to start in the playoffs? Game one, round one, who's in that net? I think that's a question again where we're not sure which way it's going to go.
So let me ask you this: game one, round one is tomorrow. Who would you start?
Oh, I mean, if it was tomorrow and the guys were playing the way that they are right now, Ullmark's the one that's won his last 5 starts. I think you got to ride the hot hand. You got to take the Pittsburgh Penguins approach. Like when the Penguins had Matt Murray and Marc-Andre Fleury, Murray ended up taking the net from Fleury both of those playoffs when they won the Cup in 16 and 17. You got to ride who's the hottest hand.
Sports are a mental game too, right? Though you've seen, obviously, we saw a little bit sometimes with Tuukka Rask. Do you tell your basically starting goaltender for the majority of the season in Swayman, do you sit him for game one? And does that affect his psyche for the remainder of the playoffs? Do you take that chance? Because I think, honestly, that's a part of it as well.
I mean, if I'm the coach and I'm going into game one of a playoff series where you're the underdog, and in all likelihood the Bruins are going to be the underdog in their playoff series, there's one question that helps me that decides who's the starting goaltender. Which goalie gives me the best chance to win this game? Mm-hmm. And right now, that's Linus Ullmark. He's won 5 starts in a row. Jeremy Swayman's gotten roughed up by Toronto, and he got roughed up last night by Detroit. If you start Jeremy Swayman against the Florida Panthers or against the Carolina Hurricanes, the way that it's gone these last few games, I don't feel confident in that. I'm hoping that Swayman can get back on track before the end of the regular season. Like, I want to see him finish the regular season with 3 or 4 good starts in a row. And then I'll feel comfortable about Swayman being the guy in the playoffs. I think Swayman is going to start in the playoffs. I think the Bruins want Swayman to be the number one guy. But he's the one that's kind of had this rough patch here. He's got to get that back on track before the playoffs actually start.
I'm worried that they might hit rough patches at the same time because, we just talked about the flip-flopping, but say Allmark starts game 1, round 1.
Gives up
He
5.
gives up 5. Then what do you do?
Then, Swayman's certainly starting game 2 in that situation.
So then we're kind of in right now a lose-lose situation. It's a very interesting question, isn't it?
I think you just got to find whatever goalie's playing the best at that time, and in whichever goalie you think is going to give you the best chance to win. Swayman's had his issues this year against high-caliber teams. It may not matter who's in net. Honestly, if you're playing Florida or if you're playing Carolina in round 1, it may not matter who's in net. Both of those teams may light you up no matter who you put in goal. Like,
right.
Those are two elite-level hockey teams. They might beat you just by the fact that they're a better team. It may not be, goaltending that ends up being the difference. It may just be that they're a heck of a lot better team than you are. I mean, look at what Carolina's done to Boston in the regular season. I mean, absolutely destroyed them in the regular season. And that's a very real possibility for who the Bruins' first-round matchup is going to be.
Yeah, and that's a good point, too. I mean, it may not depend who's in net. Fact of the matter is, Florida is a better team than Boston. Carolina is a better team than Boston. And it's just another thing coming up that the Bruins didn't need to worry about at this time of the season.
Yeah.
We talked at the beginning about injuries. Now we got the goaltending issues. When it rains, it pours.
Yeah. And the other thing is that neither guy has playoff experience. So, yes, Allmark is the veteran, the older one, and Allmark is the guy with more experience, but he's never played a playoff game in his NHL career. He was in Buffalo up until this year. He never came close to the playoffs. He's never played those big games like that because, every season that he's played in, Buffalo's been out of contention before the halfway mark of the season's even there. You knew going into the season Buffalo wasn't a playoff team. So he hasn't played in those big games, in those pressure-packed situations with the season on the line like it is in the playoffs. Jeremy Swayman, even though he's a rookie, has actually played more. He's got more playoff experience in recent years coming out of Hockey East. At least he played, college hockey playoffs, whereas Allmark literally has not seen a playoff game in years.
Yeah, and it's the great conundrum, it seems, isn't it? I mean, Hockey East, I'm not equating that to pro hockey, but...
No, it's totally different, but at least it's a playoff game. Like, you understand the pressure of it.
And it's like I would call it the SEC of college hockey, although they didn't fare too well, Hockey East, in the Frozen Four this year.
Yeah.
But, it's a real tough predicament for the Bruins to be in. If only both of them were playing well right now at the same time, it would be a lot easier, but...
Well, if they're both playing well, who starts game 1, round 1?
I'd go Swayman.
I think Swayman too, and I think they want it to be Swayman. But Swayman's the one with the 2 bad starts in his last 3, and Allmark's the one that's won you 5 in a row.
Well, there's you said 12 games left?
Yeah, 12 games left for Boston. What I'm hoping for is that Swayman just gets it back on track, and that makes it easy because then I think he starts game 1 of the playoffs.
Yeah. No, I was just about to say the same thing. That gives you a little bit of a sample size to see, to get these goalies back on track and to see who has the hot hand coming into the playoffs.
Yeah, I just hope that Swayman has like a 9-10 plus save percentage in his last 4 games and gets a nice little win streak going into the postseason. So then he can kind of have that confidence back and be ready to go because, I honestly, looking at the standings right now, I really think Boston's going to get stuck playing Carolina round 1. It may not matter who's in net. It may not matter.
I think for Florida and Carolina, I don't think it will matter.
Yeah.
For other teams, it might, but Florida and Carolina, they're going to beat you, no matter what. they're just the better team, and
Most likely. There's
yeah,
no guarantees.
I mean there is no guarantees, but I do feel like they are the better teams.
I definitely think they're a more talented team. Absolutely. We've just in the playoffs, we've seen upsets, especially recent playoffs.
I don't know if this team is. Again, this team is so confusing. I feel like we go through a midlife crisis every single episode.
I know, because they show signs of being really, really good and maybe being at that cup level, but then they always leave a little bit of question in there and always have something that leaves you kind of not quite feeling as optimistic about them.
Right now, it's the goaltending and the injury bug, which the injury bug you can't really control. The goaltending, you kind of can, and I don't know. I really don't know. This team is just so mystifying at times. It's frustrating.
If they were playing Washington in the first round, I'd be like, sweet, Bruins got that in the bag. They're on to round 2. We'll see what round 2 brings. But with the fact that they're likely going to be playing Carolina, maybe Toronto, maybe Florida, depending on how things shake out, that's certainly not going to. They're certainly not going to be the favorite in round 1. I'll say that. They are going to be the underdog in round 1.
Especially, the Maple Leafs after the win last week, I think they probably smell blood a little bit. I think, there was all this talk about the Bruins beating the Leafs and blah, 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 and this and that. And
Boston hasn't beaten Toronto this season.
And I think this season they really kind of took that to heart. And historically, in the playoffs, the Bruins have, defeated the Maple Leafs and given them a hard time. I don't see that happening this year. I think this could be the year that the Leafs, assert themselves in the playoff, run here.
If the Leafs get Tampa, though, that will be interesting.
It'll be fun to watch, I'll tell you that.
It'll certainly be fun to watch. There's no doubt about that. But all right, so let's see. We've talked about McLaughlin's first goal. We've talked about the injuries. We've talked about Jake DeBrusk. We've talked about the goaltending. Let's just take a look at these last few games overall here as a whole. The way things have gone since we last recorded a show. Last Wednesday, obviously, it was a venting episode. We were very upset about the loss to Toronto. Boston comes back with that, though, last Thursday night with an absolute slaughtering of the New Jersey Devils, 8-1, in a game that was a complete beatdown from start to finish. I don't even really need to go into details here. I think the score says it all. This was just a huge bounce-back performance from the Boston Bruins.
You think the Bruins were frustrated about the events that took place last Tuesday? They took it out on the Devils.
They sure did.
Thursday, and everybody got into the scoring action here. Mclaughlin scoring his first goal. Then you had, Eric Halla, I believe, had a goal as well, or a couple points. I don't have the box score up in front of me at the moment.
Let's see. Halla had a goal. Bergeron had 3 points, a goal and 2 assists. Mclaughlin had his goal. Frederick had an assist. Taylor Hall had a goal. DeBrusk had a 2-point night, 1 goal, 1 assist. Pastrnak had 3 assists. Grzelcyk had a 2-point game, 1-1. Riley, Lindholm, McAvoy all picked up assists. Ullmark had a great game in goal, stopping 25 out of 26. Just a complete performance from top to bottom.
Hall's been playing really well, too. I know we talked about it on the show last week, but he continues to play strong, so that's good to see, too.
Big time.
And it was just a fun game for everybody. It was one of those games where, you get a goal, you get a point, you get an assist.
Yep.
It was fun to watch, especially after the letdown of last Tuesday. And, it's one of those games where, as a team, you get a chance to hit the reset button and refocus for the slate ahead, and what better way to start off the slate than with a blowout win?
Yeah, that was obviously a nice bounce back for the Bruins after a pretty aggravating loss against the Maple Leafs. Boston continues on Saturday. They close out their 5-game homestand with a game against the Columbus Blue Jackets on Saturday night, and the score ends up 5-2. That's a little deceiving because the Bruins got 2 empty netters at the end of the game. So it was really like a 1-goal game. It was really kind of a 3-2 game until the empty netters come into play. And Boston, again, finds a way to win. They win. It was 2-2 heading into the third. Bruins win the third period, find a way to win, and end up taking home another 2 points in a 5-2 win over the Blue Jackets.
And again, we talked about how he has heated up over the past couple of months. Erik Haula had 2 goals in this one, and it's been really fun to see him progress over the course of the season from being somebody that we were mad at to somebody who we mentioned positively
Yep.
on this show. And Charlie Coyle also had a goal. He's been playing great. So again, it was the depth scorers, the additional pieces besides the big three showing up in this one, and it was closer than the box score suggested, but hey, a win is a win, and this Blue Jackets team gave the Bruins a very good game. I thought they played the Bruins well, and the Bruins were able to eke one out here as they continued their weekly slate.
So that's how Boston finishes up the homestand. Then they go out on the road for the first time in a couple of weeks, and it's a home-and-home series with the same Columbus Blue Jackets. After beating them in Boston on Saturday, they play again Monday night. And this one, Jake DeBrusk, the key player, scoring 2 goals, including the overtime winner, as the Bruins squeak out a 3-2 overtime victory over Columbus and kick off the road trip on a pretty good note there. I mean, they didn't play their best game, but they were able to come away with the 2 points, and that's what matters the most. And also a big one for DeBrusk getting the 2 goals, including the game winner. They go back out on the road, and they're able to win another one against the same Blue Jackets.
I mean, we saw it in the playoffs in 2019, I think it was. Columbus on the road is not an easy place to play. But you had Jake DeBrusk, like you said, again, just absolute, torrid scoring pace, 2 goals. You had an assist from Charlie Coyle, rather. So he's continuing to contribute. He contributed on Monday, and it's been really great to see Coyle in particular continue to make an impact on the score sheet and in the game, as well as DeBrusk continuing to just absolutely be on fire right now.
Yeah, so Boston continues winning there, but then unfortunately a little bit of a bump in the road last night against the Detroit Red Wings. Boston outshot Detroit 50-29 in this game, but ended up losing 5-3. And this one seems like a game where the Bruins just lost the goaltending battle, and that ended up losing them the game because Swayman certainly did not have his best night in goal in this one, giving up 4 goals on 28 shots, only an .857 save percentage. Meanwhile, down at the other end, Alex Nedeljkovic stopped 47 out of 50, a .940 save percentage for Nedeljkovic, and kind of stole this game for the Red Wings. And they are able to pick up an upset victory over the Bruins, and this is not a team that you really want the Bruins to be losing to, but at the end of the day, it was the second game of a back-to-back. It was on the road. It was not an easy situation to be in with some key players out of the lineup, but it still kind of stinks that they lost to Detroit.
Nedeljkovic played awesome, I thought. I thought he really did.
Goalie stole the show here.
He did. And, this was a tough loss for Boston, but I also have to tap my stick to the Red Wings. They're not the best team right now, obviously, but I think they have a solid foundation to be really successful in the future. They played well last night, I thought, all things all things considered, despite being on that losing streak. You hear me talk about it all the time, and we've talked about it on the show. It's usually the ones that you don't expect that to beat you that can beat you, and
Yep.
oftentimes will beat you. And I thought the Red Wings, starting with the goaltending, played a solid game.
Yeah, I mean, Detroit's got some good young talent. They're an up-and-coming team, but they're certainly not at that playoff level yet. And, that's a tough one for the Bruins to drop. But at the end of the day, overall, though, they've still been playing very, very well. They went 4-1 on their 5-game homestand. If we look at their these last 4 games that they've played, obviously they won 3 of them. They only lost coming to the Red Wings. So, overall, Boston's been playing well and just trying to keep pace with Toronto, Tampa, everybody else in that Atlantic Division and where they're at right now in that top wild card spot. Looks like the Bruins are probably going to stay there, but there's still an opportunity for them to surpass the Lightning potentially, and maybe even Toronto if Toronto goes cold. But with the way that the Leafs have been playing recently, I wouldn't really expect that to happen. They've been playing great hockey for the most part. So Boston ends up with 3 out of 4 in their last 4 games. That's still pretty darn good. And continuing to try and play good hockey going into the postseason.
There's always one on, a long road trip or even a long homestand that maybe it's towards the end of the trip and you just don't have that same energy as you did when you started the homestand. That was Detroit for the Bruins on Tuesday night. But overall, I thought the Bruins had a pretty solid week. They weren't easy games with the exception of the New Jersey game. And, the Bruins are doing what they need to do in order to position themselves for the playoffs and get ready for the playoffs, like we said at the beginning of the show. And I think for me, the big thing will be the goaltending and how the key players recover from the injuries.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. So, final thing here, we're going to look ahead. The Bruins have 3 games between now and when we will record again next week. And that is Tampa Bay on Friday night in Tampa as this road trip continues for Boston. They get a couple days off, Wednesday and Thursday off, and then Friday night against the Lightning. Obviously, the Bruins have done fairly well against the Lightning this season. You just beat them last month in a big home game. On March 24th, the Bruins were able to win that one 3-2. This is going to be a big game against a team that is right next to them in the standings as well. So, that's going to be a huge matchup in a playoff style feel to it.
I think it's going to be a really good game. I think it's going to be a really fun game. I don't know. I know I like to predict my winners and things like that, but this is going to be a tough one because on the road, Tampa's a tough place to play as well. You have a Tampa Bay team that may be looking for a little bit of revenge following their loss at TD Garden. What was it, last week?
A couple weeks ago now. Yep.
And so that game could go either way. I'll say a loss, but it'll be something like 4-3. It won't be a blowout.
All right, so following up that one, the Bruins finish out their current road trip at Washington on Sunday afternoon. It's a nationally televised TNT game, 1:30 p.m. afternoon start against the Capitals. Boston has owned the Capitals so far this season, and obviously going back to the playoff series last year, they've played Washington very, very well. This is their final meeting of the year. Bruins have won the first 2. I feel like this is a game that Boston should probably be able to take.
Me too. I agree. But it is a Sunday afternoon game against Washington. You remember the last time, or maybe not the last time, but the Sunday afternoon games have always kind of presented a problem for the Bruins. I see them winning this one too, but I think it will be a good game. I don't think it will be a blowout by any means.
No, definitely expecting a good matchup there. Boston and Washington, for the most part, usually play really good, solid games against each other. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one goes. Last one before next Wednesday, April 12th against the St. Louis Blues. Back at home for the Bruins. Cross-conference matchup. Obviously, both lineups are quite a bit different than they were when these teams met back in the finals in 2019. Yeah, I think there's been a lot of roster changes on both sides since then, so it's certainly not like it's a finals rematch or anything like that. But St. Louis is having a pretty good year out in the Western Conference. They're right now third place in the Central Division. They're certainly going to be a playoff team this year. Got to imagine that this is going to be a pretty tightly contested game.
Yeah, the rosters and the names and faces may have changed for St. Louis, but they're still playing solid hockey. You know, like you said, 2019 Stanley Cup final rematch, but I don't think it will have the same feel to it. Nevertheless, this will be a good late season test for the Bruins against a good Western Conference team, and these are the types of games that you want to win if you're preparing for a playoff push. I see the Bruins losing this one, but I don't think it'll be a blowout. I'm going to say something like 3-2 because Jordan Binnington is also a fantastic goaltender.
All right, so 3 games here between now and the next time that we record a show. What are you thinking for a record? You've got them beating Washington but losing to Tampa and St. Louis. So that'd be a little bit of a tough stretch here for Boston. I'm going to say 1-1-1.
What's your overtime game?
Tampa. I think they lose to Tampa in overtime. I think they beat the Capitals. And then first game back at home after a road trip, that tends to be a trap game sometimes. And St. Louis is certainly no slouch of a team. I'll say that they lose the St. Louis game. But I'm going to say overtime loss against the Lightning and a win against the Capitals.
I'll go with that too. That's the way I was thinking.
That first home game back after you're on the road for like a week plus, that's a lot of time a trap game for teams.
Yeah, exactly. And I would definitely go 1-1-1 as well with those same games. I think, this isn't going to be an easy 3-game stretch for Boston by any means. And
definitely not.
Truthfully, I think it's going to be a good test for the goaltending, and hopefully we'll have a more clear picture of what the goaltenders look like when we record next week.
Yeah, for sure, man. So that's going to do it here. That's going to bring us to the end of episode 62. And obviously, more big games coming up for the Bruins here as they look to position themselves for the playoffs. A tough one against the Lightning. Always a good matchup with the Capitals. And then the Blues come to town next week on Tuesday. So some tough games here coming up against quality opponents. All 3 games against playoff teams. So it's certainly not going to be easy. But Danny, as always, man, thank you so much for coming on, being a part of the show, and talking some hockey.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I love talking hockey, and it seems like this team never fails at giving us things to talk about.
That is for sure. So before we go, again, I want to give a thank you to Mark Allred and the entire team at Black and Gold Productions for all of their support. This show would not be happening without them. Also, don't forget about the links down in the description of the video. There are some great different options as far as apparel and products go, where you've got Boston Bruins branded stuff. You've got NHL branded from any of the teams. You've got NCAA apparel available as well. So a lot of great stuff down there, guys. Please check it out. It does help out a lot. That is going to bring us to the end here of episode 62. We'll be back with episode 63. There'll be plenty more Bruins stuff to talk about for that one. So we're getting closer and closer to the playoffs here, and we are just trying to watch this team hopefully play well going into the postseason and see what they can do when things really start to count. But that brings us to the end of this one. Thank you guys so much. Have a great weekend. Thank you again for watching and following the show. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll be talking to you soon.